My name is Michael, and I'm 43 years old. I've been married to my wife Sarah for almost 10 years now, and we live in Bend, Oregon. Life is simple, but steady. I manage construction crews, and Sarah works part-time at a dental clinic. We don't have kids, which looking back now feels like a blessing considering everything that happened. About 5 years before we got married, I bought a small cabin near Crater Lake. It was a place I'd saved for and worked hard to afford, completely under my name, all my money. It was meant to be my escape from the city, a quiet spot where I could fish, relax, and recharge away from traffic and daily hassles. Sarah liked going there sometimes, but honestly, she preferred the comforts of hotels' reliable Wi-Fi and trendy brunch spots. Still, I always called the cabin ours to keep the peace and share that dream with her. I never thought this generosity would turn into such a nightmare. 2 winters ago, Sarah's parents, David and Linda, hit a rough patch. David lost his accounting job, and Linda's small craft business barely brought in any income. Their home in Spokane was suddenly too expensive to keep, and their credit cards were maxed out. David even mentioned they might have to spend the winter in a motel. One night, Sarah came to me in tears, begging me to help her parents. She said they just needed a place to stay temporarily, and that we could make it work. I wasn't thrilled about it. The cabin was mine after all, but I agreed under one condition. They had to sign a temporary agreement. I drafted myself legally notarized by a friend. It allowed them to stay through the winter and into spring, but they couldn't make major changes or claim ownership. And they had to leave by May unless we both agreed otherwise. Sarah rolled her eyes at my caution, saying, "They're family, Michael. It's just for a little while." Looking back, I wish I'd trusted my instincts. They moved in around mid-November. I kept my distance, focused on work, and assumed I'd visit in spring to check in. During the winter, I occasionally checked in with Sarah to see how things were going at the cabin. She would casually mention small updates. David had fixed the porch steps, Linda had replaced some curtains, and they had repainted a guest room. At the time, none of these seemed like big deals. I figured it was normal maintenance, and I trusted that they were respecting the agreement we had. Then came April. One Saturday, I decided to surprise them with a visit. I packed some beer, snacks, and my fishing gear, planning to spend the day there fishing and relaxing. When I pulled into the driveway, something immediately felt off. A new metal gate blocked the entrance with a keypad lock instead of the old padlock I'd given them. That wasn't something I'd approved or authorized. I was already annoyed. Then I tried to use my key on the front door and it didn't work. The locks had been changed. I knocked firmly. At first, no answer. When the door finally opened, David was standing there looking calm, as if he had expected me. He just leaned against the doorframe and said, "You should have called ahead." I asked what happened to my key. He gave me a smug smile and said we made a few changes. I stepped inside and nobody stopped me, but nobody moved either. Linda was in the kitchen acting like she owned the place. A few moments later, Sarah appeared from down the hall. She looked at me and smiled softly, saying, "It's still family property." That moment cut deeper than I expected. I walked through the cabin, noticing that many things were different. My old recliner, the one I bought with my first construction bonus, was gone. The rugs had been replaced. The artwork on the walls no longer included any pictures of me, only photos of them filling every frame. Then I went to my old office nook, and there it was. A big binder labeled Property Documents, Crater Lake Cabin. Inside were utility bills, receipts, and then a document that made my blood run cold. a forged deed showing the cabin legally owned by Sarah alone. Alongside that, there was a fake agreement supposedly signed by David and Linda, filled with scribbles and bullet points, claiming all family members have equal rights and that the property was managed jointly by them. I looked at David dumbfounded and asked, "What is this?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "We just put things in order. You never seemed to care much about it." Sarah sat on the armrest nearby, acting like this was a casual discussion on a talk show. "You always said it was family property, Michael. We're just making it official." I didn't yell or argue. I just left quietly stunned and furious. The drive back home was silent. Once I was safe, I retrieved the original purchase agreement and deed from my fireproof safe. Both clearly showed only my name. I copied everything and sent it to someone I never thought I'd have to involve: Sarah's uncle Richard, a real estate lawyer in Portland, who had a long history with her family and no love for David and Linda. Just 3 days after sending Richard the documents, I received a call from him. No small talk, just straight to business. He said, "I've been waiting for something like this." Richard asked detailed questions, and I answered with everything I had: photos, the notarized agreement, original deed, even pictures of me standing outside the cabin on the day I purchased it. Richard wasn't just interested in helping, he wanted justice. He told me that David and Linda had pulled similar stunts before. Years ago, they had tried to insert themselves into a distant relative's farmland in Idaho through forged documents. Richard had shut that down hard. I asked if he could help with this situation, and he said, "I'll enjoy every minute of it." That same day, Richard sent a certified cease and desist letter to David and Linda demanding they vacate immediately. He included the real deed and the notarized agreement and warned them that they were trespassing and breaking the law. That letter lit a fuse. The next evening, Sarah exploded on my phone, furious that I had threatened her family with legal action. She claimed they were just making the cabin feel like home and that the legal action was cold and unnecessary. I told her the truth. The fake deed was fraud, and the cabin was mine, bought with my own money years before our marriage. She responded with a line that cut deeper than anything: "If you had just let it go, none of this would have happened." I hung up exhausted. When Sarah arrived home that night, she was furious, slamming doors, tossing keys, accusing me of trying to destroy her family. I stayed calm, telling her, "You lied and you tried to steal from me. That's not family." She cried, claiming she didn't know what David and Linda were doing behind my back. But I knew better. I had seen the fake documents and knew she had watched them being created. In the weeks that followed, Richard escalated the fight. He sent a formal eviction notice giving them 14 days to leave or face court. Instead of leaving, David and Linda doubled down. They tried to record the forged deed with the county clerk, attempting to legitimize it. Richard caught it immediately and filed an injunction warning them that continuing would lead to felony fraud charges. Then things got even worse. David filed a restraining order against me, accusing me of intimidation and threats during my visit. Complete lies. Richard crushed the restraining order within 48 hours, presenting photos, timestamps, and my mail records proving I never contacted them after that day. At this point, I was done defending myself. I told Richard I wanted to pursue criminal charges alongside the civil case. He agreed, saying these people had been getting away with this kind of fraud for too long. Meanwhile, Sarah started acting strangely quiet and distant. One night, I caught her packing a suitcase. She told me she was going to stay with her sister because she couldn't handle the tension while I was tearing her family apart. I didn't stop her. A few days later, I received notice that Sarah had hired a lawyer to explore community property laws planning to claim half the cabin. I handed everything to Richard, who laughed it off, explaining that since I bought the cabin before marriage with my own money and it was titled solely in my name, she had no case. Still, Sarah tried. Her lawyer argued that the cabin had become marital property because we used it together and that she had invested emotional labor into it. Richard responded with a detailed 43-page file of evidence receipts, timelines her own texts confirming the cabin was mine, and the notarized agreement with her parents. The case was quickly dismissed. David and Linda finally moved out, but left a mess: trash everywhere, ripped curtain rods, rotting food, and greedy bastards spray painted on the garage wall. I documented everything with photos and included them in the damages claim. 2 days later, Sarah texted, "Was it worth it?" I didn't respond because I wasn't finished fighting yet. After the destruction David and Linda caused, Richard advised pushing for restitution not just for the money, but to prevent them from repeating this to others. He said, "This isn't just about finances, this is how you stop them." We filed a claim demanding over $42,000 in damages covering repairs, cleanup, legal fees, and court costs. Richard believed the hefty amount would scare them, and hopefully they would show up in court so I could face them directly when the judge read my name on the rightful deed. But before the trial began, a shocking new development came to light. Richard called me one morning amused but serious. Sarah had filed to have her name added to the cabin's deed, claiming it was an oversight. She submitted a forged quit-claim deed to the county clerk stating the property was jointly owned, signed by herself, and notarized by Becky Alvarez, her youngest cousin who'd recently gotten her notary license online. Sarah had roped her into this forgery. Richard immediately reported the forgery to authorities and contacted Becky. Becky admitted she had been coerced by Sarah to notarize the false document, thinking it was just paperwork cleanup. Becky quickly withdrew the notarization after being threatened with accessory charges. This move escalated the case from a family dispute to criminal forgery and fraud. Richard warned me this would be taken to the district attorney if we pushed forward. I told him I was ready and started preparing for the upcoming court battles. Weeks before the civil trial for damages, Sarah and her parents faced the real possibility of criminal charges. However, the most unexpected twist came from someone silent throughout the ordeal: Sarah's sister, Melissa. One night, Melissa reached out after over a year of no contact, requesting a face-to-face meeting at a local cafe. She appeared exhausted and confided that Sarah, her parents, and even Tessa herself had been planning this scheme for over a year. They intended to transfer the cabin into joint ownership, fix it up, then flip it without telling me. Melissa revealed that Sarah had asked her to lie under oath, claiming I promised the cabin as a future family home. She had even prepared a written statement. Melissa refused, saying, "This isn't right and you need to know what they're capable of." She handed me a manila envelope with an email thread among Sarah, David, and Linda dated months earlier, discussing the exit plan. They plotted to corner me emotionally to make me give up. Melissa promised to testify against them if needed. I couldn't express my gratitude. I passed everything on to Richard, who read the evidence and declared, "We're going scorched earth." And that was just the beginning. We hadn't even reached court yet. The day of the hearing came quickly. I walked into the Flathead County District Court carrying boxes of evidence. Richard, calm as always, was ready to present the case. I felt tense but focused. On the other side of the courtroom sat David and Linda, whispering nervously, dressed in their Sunday best. Sarah sat between them, arms crossed and bored. None of them brought a lawyer. Clearly, they thought they could talk their way out of it. Big mistake. The judge meticulously reviewed the packet. The original deed, the notarized temporary agreement, Melissa's emails, the forged quick claim deed, and Becky Alvarez's statement admitting she was misled. He took his time reading everything. Then, locking eyes with David, the judge said, "Sir, do you understand the gravity of falsifying property ownership and attempting to file fraudulent documents?" David opened his mouth to respond, but the judge cut him off sharply. "I'm not asking for a speech. Yes or no?" David nodded reluctantly. Sarah tried to speak, but Richard immediately stood. "Your Honor, we request a summary judgment on all claims and a referral to the district attorney for a criminal investigation." The judge agreed without hesitation. With a bang of the gavel, he declared that I was the sole legal owner of the cabin. He ordered David and Linda to pay $42,680 for damages, cleanup, legal costs, and court fees. He also referred them for criminal prosecution for their fraudulent activities. Then the judge turned to Sarah. "I've seen many attempts to claim property unfairly, but you orchestrated this scheme. You involved family and fake documents. If it were within my power, I would jail you right now." Sarah remained silent. Outside the courtroom, she tried to speak with me, saying I was scared. I faced her squarely. "You lost everything because you never truly owned any of it. You only lied to get close." 2 days later, I served her with divorce papers. Richard moved quickly, and when Sarah tried again to claim part of the cabin, she failed once more. David and Linda couldn't pay their damages. They lost their retirement condo and ended up in a small rental on Spokane's outskirts. Their credit is ruined, and no one in the extended family talks to them anymore. David and Linda couldn't cover the damages, so they lost their retirement condo and ended up renting a modest place on the outskirts of Spokane. Their credit was in ruins, and the wider family cut ties with them after the truth came to light. It was a total social and financial collapse. Becky Alvarez, the notary who had been roped into the forgery scheme, lost her license and was fined. But I chose to let that slide. She was young and naive, not malicious. Sarah tried to salvage her reputation by posting emotional posts on social media about betrayal and a controlling husband who drove her family apart. No one believed her, especially after Melissa shared the incriminating email screenshots in the comments. A few months later, Sarah moved out of state, working part-time at a salon in Boise, and even reverted to using her maiden name. Good riddance. As for me, I kept the cabin. I spent weekends restoring it, cleaning, fixing broken parts, replacing what was destroyed, and even hanging a new "no trespassing" sign on the porch. No exceptions. I learned a valuable lesson from all this. I had let too much slide for the sake of peace. I ignored warning signs and prioritized politeness over setting boundaries. That was my biggest mistake, and I won't make it again. Now I visit the cabin almost every other weekend, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I fish, chop wood, and sit on the porch with a cold beer, listening to the whisper of the trees. Every time I do, I smile. The people who tried to steal from me ended up losing everything. And I I got back more than just the cabin. I reclaimed my peace, my self respect, and the satisfaction of knowing that every morning they wake up broke bitter and powerless. That, my friends, is what real revenge looks like. After everything settled, my life started to regain normalcy. The legal battles behind me, I could finally focus on what truly mattered, rebuilding my peace and moving forward. I realized that holding on to resentment would only weigh me down, so I chose forgiveness not for them but for myself. I threw myself into my work with renewed passion, managing construction crews in the Montana area with a clear head and no distractions. The cabin became my sanctuary once again, a place where I could disconnect from the chaos and reconnect with who I really was. Sometimes friends would join me for weekend retreats, and together we'd enjoy the quiet beauty of nature. Fishing, hiking, and late-night campfires replaced stressful phone calls and tense family encounters. It was healing in its purest form. I also started volunteering at local community centers, sharing my story to help others understand the importance of setting boundaries and standing up for oneself. I wanted to turn my experience into a lesson, a reminder that being kind doesn't mean letting others take advantage of you. Though my marriage ended in divorce, I'm grateful for the clarity it brought. I'm now dating someone who respects my values and supports my passions. She loves the outdoors as much as I do, and together we're building a future based on trust and mutual respect. Looking back, I realize that sometimes the people closest to us can disappoint us the most, but it's how we respond that defines us. I chose strength over bitterness, action over inaction, and self-respect over sacrifice. The cabin stands not just as a physical place, but as a symbol of resilience, proof that no matter what storms come, we can weather them and come out stronger on the other side. The aftermath of the legal battle was more intense than I expected. Mark and Lacey didn't leave quietly. They trashed the cabin before moving out, ripping curtains, leaving garbage piled up, and even spray painting nasty messages on the garage walls. I documented everything with photos to support my claim for damages. Richard was relentless in pursuing restitution. He said this wasn't just about money, it was about stopping them from doing this to anyone else. We filed a civil lawsuit for property damage, forgery, and trespassing totaling over $42,000. I hoped it would scare them, but more importantly, I wanted justice. Mark and Lacey couldn't pay the damages. Their retirement condo was sold off, and now they live in a modest rental on the outskirts of Spokane. Their credit ruined, and their reputation in the family shattered. No one wants to associate with people who try to steal from their own relatives. Becky Alvarez, the young notary coerced into falsifying documents, lost her license and was fined. I decided to show Mercy she was inexperienced, not malicious. It felt right to give her a chance to learn from her mistake. Meanwhile, Tessa tried to salvage her image by posting sad stories online about betrayal and a controlling husband turning her family against her. But her efforts backfired when Mel shared email screenshots exposing the truth. People saw through the lies quickly. Tessa eventually moved out of state, starting over in Boise, working part-time at a salon, and even reverting to her maiden name. That was probably the best thing for all of us. I focused on restoring the cabin, fixing what was broken, replacing what was stolen, and putting up a clear, no trespassing sign. Now the cabin is truly mine again, a place of peace and solitude. I learned a hard lesson about boundaries and trust. I had let kindness blind me to warning signs and ignored red flags because I wanted to avoid conflict. That won't happen again. Now I visit the cabin nearly every weekend, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I fish, chop wood, and simply sit on the porch listening to the wind through the pines. Each moment reminds me that I reclaimed more than just a property. I reclaimed my dignity and peace of mind. Reflecting on everything, I realized that what I went through was about more than just a cabin or legal battles. It was a test of character, patience, and standing up for what's right when those closest to you try to take advantage. The people who tried to steal my property, Mark Lacey and even Tessa, they lost everything. Their greed and disrespect for boundaries cost them their home, their reputation, and their relationships with the rest of the family. They're left with nothing but bitterness and regret. Meanwhile, I gained something far more valuable than just owning that cabin free and clear. I reclaimed my peace, my self-respect, and a renewed sense of strength. Every time I sit on that porch watching the lake ripple in the sunset, I'm reminded that integrity and perseverance win in the end. True revenge isn't about causing harm or fighting fire with fire. It's about protecting what's yours, setting clear boundaries, and refusing to be a victim. It's about walking away with your head held high and letting karma handle the rest. I'm not the kind of person to make scenes or burn bridges lightly, but this experience taught me that some lines should never be crossed, and when they are, you have to stand firm. Now my cabin is my sanctuary again, a place where I can breathe freely far from toxicity. And those who tried to take it from me wake up every day knowing what they lost because of their choices. That's what real revenge looks like.